Vicksburg Village Council meeting. If you'd all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll take a moment of silence and then we'll do roll call when you're ready, Tracy.
Bailey?
Here.
Frisbee?
Here.
Holmes?
Here.
Keller?
Here.
Merrill? Reister? Here. President Adams?
Here. We have an agenda for tonight's meeting in front of us. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion from the council for approval of the same.
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. There's no scheduled appearances tonight. We do have a public official with us tonight, Mr. Gisler from the county. John, do you have anything to say to the?
I always have something to say.
All right.
Thank you.
Please approach the podium.
I'm John Gisler. I'm the South County County Commissioner, and I have two small items today. One is that we have a new airport director, a chap named Craig Williams, who did 20-some years as a airport manager or director somewhere, and most recently from Flint. And when he was hired, one of the little sidelines that I picked up, or sidelights, was that Flint is the third largest airport in the state of Michigan. I didn't know that. I don't think that's geographically. I think that's passengers going in and out. So, there's a piece of information that'll get you nowhere except maybe a drink in a bar sometime. And the other thing is possibly even more important. I turned in my paperwork last week. I am going to run for re-election as the county commissioner for South County. As long as I keep learning things every day, literally, and my health stays good and you guys continue to tolerate me, you're stuck with me. Thank you.
Okay, John, thank you. Is there any citizen at this time that would like to address an agenda item? We have 4 minutes for a citizen that would want to address an agenda item on tonight's agenda. Seeing no one, approach the podium. We have a consent agenda in front of us that includes minutes of our last meeting, a warrant report for $160,719, no event or correspondence. I'd entertain a motion for approval of the same.
Make a motion, we approve the general consent agenda.
Is there support?
Support.
Been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion by council on any of the items there? Hearing none, we'll do roll call. Tracy?
Bailey?
Yes.
Frisbee?
Yes.
Holmes?
Yes.
Keller?
Yes.
Merrill? Yes. Reister? Yes. President Adams?
Yes. Next item on the agenda for council action is legislative approval of our recodification of village ordinances. Bobby, are you going to address that? I saw you back there someplace.
Yep. Good evening, council. So I not knowing how much everyone dug through it, I'll, like last meeting, just give a brief overview. So what the recodification is, back in the late 90s was the last time all the village ordinances were compiled into one book. And there's a whole bunch of amendments since then. And I don't know that all of those, at least since the middle of the 2000s, were incorporated. They're all standalone documents. So what the recodification does, and if anyone's interested, I brought a copy of what it would look like when it's done. They incorporate all of those amendments into the code. And, sometimes when that happens, there might be something that references another chapter which, doesn't go anywhere, or there's changes in state, federal, or even local laws, and they point out some of those. So instead of, it's not necessarily a rewriting, I think it was a little over half of the book is remaining as is. Over half of it was recommended being just fine. And then the only real substantial changes were some of the major ones, and I don't know them off the top of my head, but essentially there was like some sort of trying to think, it's a boilerplate reference to law enforcement to the state. Andrew Horn drafted that one. And then there's one with some sort of ordinance violation, and it ties it to a standardized fee, which would be based off of a fee schedule. There was a lot of references to fee figures, such as it might say $100 for an action. Every fee in the code was changed to a fee established by council. So where the council would establish ordinance violation fee, permit fees, instead of having conflicting provisions in the book. There was one to update the uniform traffic code, and that's a boilerplate one that came with a sample reference, and Andrew Horn worked on that one. And the only real significant change was to the zoning ordinance, where they identified that we had a deficiency in our definitions. So in our use table, there's probably 60 to 70 definitions, uses, but there's only about 10 definitions. So that leaves staff or the planning commission who's to call a shoe store, for example. There's obviously better examples. So using something called the American Planning Association, the Planner's Dictionary, they offer you sample definitions. And that dictionary apparently had definitions for everything. And there were some other things such as adult foster homes, which are care homes for 6 or fewer individuals, or daycare 6 or fewer. There's state laws that require the local zoning to permit it by right anywhere you permit a house. So that was put in there. We referenced something called care homes, and then they require special use permits at higher levels up to 20 people. So those were some of the legal technical things in there that were updated. And then I added as well, we have a zone called the R2A zone. It's referenced in the zoning code, but it doesn't exist. And the description in the zoning code is for the older platted areas of town. Think your area is probably built before 1950, and it allows smaller setbacks. So without it referenced anywhere, I just mirrored the R2 zone, which is any single family zone in the village. I had it mirror the uses, so if a house is permitted there, so there was nothing new made there. And probably in the next year or two, we're going to look at mapping that, because there is quite a difference if you live in Madison Heights versus in the village. So that's very inconsistent scales of development. So that's the gist of the recode, and what was supplied with the packet is what General Code sent us, and it's a chapter by chapter description of what works, what didn't. Now, there were some things which were, probably bigger than the scope of this project, and it helped us identify what we should look at first. So those items were the land division chapter. Ours references an old state law. The sign code, that's due to a Supreme Court action, which basically made every sign code in the country illegal in a sense. The sewer chapter, telecommunications, and the wireless chapter. So those are the chapters where, in working on it with the village attorney, there was a significant number of changes that needed to be made, and probably outside of my expertise to do it. So the thought is, we can work with what we have, make sure we check with the attorney if something comes up to do it right, but prioritize those first, get this done, and then we know what we need to work on using this in the master plan. So I know there's a lot to it there. It was a lot of work, so if there's any questions on it or your guys' thoughts on it.
One thing for the council, on the chapter involving public utilities, as we go through the budget process for the 2020-2021 fiscal year, we'll be bringing forward those updated ordinances to fit within this project, and Andrew Horn and staff is already working on those. So that will be an example. Probably the next 2 most significant ordinances to come in front of the council will be during that budget presentation. So we make sure that we meet the expectations of the state in that.
And one more thing to add in what Jim's referencing there, this is not the final approval. What this is, per General Code, they recommend it goes in front of the legislative body. Basically, I'm not just staff working in an island, so the Planning Commission approved it 7-0 after asking for an extra month to review it. At this point, if it's found sufficient by the council, it gets sent back to General Code, and there's probably about 11 ordinances since this document was given to us that are going to be included, and they'll give us what would be the final document. and then that would be the formal adoption, public hearing approval aspect of it.
So-
And I'm trying to think if there was something else I'm missing in that, so.
The one as well that we've added on with general code is we've requested that they make the ordinance all gender neutral.
Okay, at this time, you're not requesting any approval of council.
Maybe not a formal approval, but at least some sort of affirmation of the work to send it back to general code, or however you guys decide to do that.
Okay, I'll take my guidance from the members of the planning commission.
Well, we'll make a motion to move forward in the finalization of the document.
Okay, is there support?
Support.
Been moved and supported that we move forward with the finalization of the document. Is there any comments from the council?
Sure.
Okay,
I just had a comment. I know that in the past, we've had noise in the village and people were concerned, and it seemed like their needs weren't being addressed. And so it sounds like on page 35, it used to be noise, chapter 308, it says it used to be a misdemeanor, and now it's going to be a civil infraction.
what page are you looking at again?
I don't know. It says 35, but let's see, is that really in order? I don't know.
And to address that, there in the code, there's municipal civil infractions and misdemeanors. And I believe it was 1413, there was action by the village to have any ordinance be a municipal civil infraction instead of a misdemeanor. So
Okay.
any violation of anything in the village code is changed to a municipal civil infraction instead of a misdemeanor.
Okay, and so when the mill was going through their process, we have this PUD agreement that handles their things to a certain code,
Yep.
so.
Yep, so, and there's additional restrictions in the PUD mill agreement and on top of having to follow any village ordinance.
Okay, thanks.
Any other
I have
questions?
a question. Once this is voted on, how long is it gonna take for that to get kicked back to general? And
I-
then,
I'm ready to send it. I can send it within a week. I'm just gonna double check with Andrew Horn on the attachment C where it says use, it gives you a boilerplate document, so I just asked him to insert the Village of Vicksburg, so I imagine within a week or two. And then they request 45 business days once upon receipt, and they might, unless they ask more questions, because I'm sending back, like I said, about 11 other ordinances to be incorporated in there, including the ones most recently approved in
so
December.
realistically, we could think probably May, we might get this back for formal approval, final approval.
And once it's returned, I think they give us 50 days, assuming something hasn't changed since 17. So I anticipate a month or two to digest the document and then work with Tracy on noticing requirements, because with the little changes, I'm not sure what we have to publish. So I would like a little bit of time, and they provide a little bit of time.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes, please.
Just curious, in looking at this, it's been about 20 years since the last time that we addressed this, and looking at the large number here, I'm just curious if it's staff's recommendation that we establish a shorter time frame to address this or not. I'm just curious in looking at the large number of changes versus the time frame that it was last time we did this.
Preferably if the village goes through the process and gets an approval of a new ordinance, at that time, we'd get it placed properly in our ordinance book, as well as being in the proper place online. Also, it would be our intention that was ordinance being updated, or if it's new, would meet all the standards of the expectation. So it would go per ordinance. It would be how we would want it, but absolutely, I don't think you'd want to go any more than 5 years.
Okay, is that any other questions by council? Okay, we have a motion, Tracy, and support. We'll do roll call.
Frisbee,
Yes.
Holmes,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
Merrill,
Yes.
Reister. Yes. Bailey,
Yes.
President Adams.
Yes.
Thank you.
Jim, will you take us through the consideration of the engineering service contracts?
Yes, President Adams. This has to do with our relationship with Prine Newhoff, our engineering services. We've provided the cover letter that was sent to us on January 16th, along with the associated fees. So this is their yearly fee schedule. On all of the contract work that we have with the organization is individually approved by the council, but this is the hourly rate that's associated with their professional staff, as well as they have the MS4 stormwater is a separate agreement, and they've handled that for the village, I believe, since 2010. So that's a separate document, but they handle, then that's our reporting with the state and everything associated with the stormwater.
Okay. And it's staff's recommendation, we approve both these documents?
Yes, because any engineering services are a professional service, so you don't have to go out to bid. If council, recent memory for our trail north of TU Avenue, that wasn't existing infrastructure in that, so we did go out to bid. Are using a different engineering firm for that. So that option for each project in the future is there if a council were to decide, but any type of fees or totality of a cost of a project are always, the engineering services are always included in the totality of that project and would be voted on individually as we proceed forward through the fiscal year.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm looking right now at the current fee schedule. Is that what you're speaking to?
Just so I make sure that I'm with you, Gail, what document are you looking at from the packet?
It's from the packet, and it says current fee schedule. I just want to make sure I know what we're talking about. There's no page number, so I can't
Yeah,
give
that's
you.
the first of two documents about,
It's about halfway through, maybe.
yeah.
Correct. So you're on the page with the classification of senior consultant, senior project manager two, and et cetera, down
Correct.
from $180 hourly billing rate down to $60 for a technician?
Yes,
Yes,
that's what we're talking about.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? If not, I assume Tracy will take these separately. So first, I'd like to entertain a motion for approval of the engineering service agreement for 2020.
And I'll make a motion that we enter into an agreement of engineering services with Prine Newhoff.
Okay. Is there support? Support. Okay, moved and supported. Any further questions? Okay, we'll do roll call on that issue.
Holmes,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
Merrill,
Yes.
Reister. Yes. Bailey,
Yes.
Frisbee,
Yes.
President Adams.
Yes. Next, we'll do, consider approval of professional services for stormwater permit engineering services for 2020 through 2024. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
Moved and supported. Any further questions by council?
I think you answered me 2021, 2020 to 2024, right? It's a 4-year agreement.
That's what I understand. Okay, we're ready for roll call?
Keller,
Move previous question. I think, did you get your,
Yes.
get your question answered?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's,
Okay. Yes.
Merrill,
Yes.
Reister. Yes. Bailey,
Yes.
Frisbee,
Yes.
Holmes,
Yes.
President Adams.
yes. Next item on the agenda is the schedule for village council meetings in 2020.
President Adams, we have one change of this document. And at this time, I want to apologize to the council as well. In talking to Mr. Adams, I got back into town late this afternoon. These summaries, it's my understanding, didn't get to you from where I was at Boyne Highlands hitting a send on an email. So we're happy to answer any and all questions on some of these things. And again, I apologize for the summaries that did not get to you. But on the document, on this agenda point, reference the 2020 meetings. The past 3 years, we have not had a council meeting during spring break, which would be April 6th. What we have done is gone with a work session on the following meeting schedule of April 20th. So we'd have, because we use that time while we're usually into budget presentations in different groups. So for council discussion, but staff is looking at if it's staying similar to the schedules of the past few years, that might want to be discussed and noted. On the other is Monday, July 20th. We're looking to recommend if we can move that to July 13th. And as we get closer, we would move the planning commission if need be. But we have one meeting in the month of July, August, and September per village ordinance. And then the discussion point there as we proceed through the budget is if the council would want to make the July meeting an annual event like we had last year, where it's down at the pavilion in that type of a situation. So those are the two points on that document.
Okay.
Why are we changing the July date? Because we couldn't get the pavilion on the 20th?
No, the pavilion's available on the 20th. I discussed it with Mr. Adams, and I'm scheduled to be out of the state of Michigan on July 20th.
Okay, thank you.
Chair would like to entertain a motion to cancel the April 6th meeting and move it to a work session on April 20th and move the July 20th meeting to July 13th. Is there a motion for same?
So moved.
Is there support? Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion by council? Okay, we'll do a voice call here. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we've got a schedule for meetings for 2020. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of the Planning Commission recommendations for variance request at 201 North Michigan Avenue. Who's going to address that?
We'll have Planning Director Durkee come up and be able to answer any questions the council might have. This is coming with a recommendation by the majority of the Planning Commission. On the first issue, I believe that the vote was 7-2, and on the second, 8-1, both in favor. The votes in dissension were both based on not feeling the hardship was met, but again, coming out of the Planning Commission, it is recommended for approval. And Bobby Durkee will be available to answer any questions. Staff is also supporting and recommending an approval of the variance request, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Durkee.
So the requests in front of you, there's two variance requests associated with this. One is for a side yard setback of 8.5 feet instead of the 10 feet required, and that setback is measured from the eaves of the house. And then the other one, there's a limit to the amount of how much you can cover a lot with buildings, and that is 20%. It's in the R2 zone, and the proposal is 21%.
Could you give me an idea of exactly where this house is on that? It's on that curved area, right?
Yep.
Where is this house?
So it's on North Michigan, which is the little separate piece of Michigan behind the family fair. It's
Right.
201. So when you're driving, I don't know the name of that road, you're almost looking right at it. They had the estate. There's a brick house on an angle.
Yes.
And it's got the long overhangs.
Okay, thank you. That's the one I thought it was, but
Also-
I wanted to know what we're talking about, so. Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Also, for the council's information, the Phillips are here, and I'm sure would be willing to answer any questions as well.
I just needed to
but-
know what house it was, so.
No
thanks.
problem. I just wanted to let you know they're in attendance.
And, with a variance request, for the council or the zoning board of appeals, as you are in this decision-making, the decision is made on a hardship to the zoning ordinance standard. So just as a reminder, when you make your consideration, it has to be based off of the zoning ordinance standards. An example would be if you didn't like the way the house looks, that's not a viable reason. So in your discussion or consideration, keep that in mind.
Okay.
And then I would recommend a vote for each variance.
Okay. Tim, do you have any comments?
There was a lot of discussion at the planning commission meeting, definitely. There was no one other than the applicants there speaking in favor, but on the other hand, there was nobody there speaking against. Their neighbors weren't there. They were all reported out within 300 yards. Everybody got mailings at what was happening. So, it comes down to that square hole in a round peg, whereas these houses and these lots were built long before our zoning ordinances were created, and the room's just not there to comply with it. And it encroaches no more on the back than it does now with the addition. And the real hard one was along the lot line with the neighbor. But it's going to be put into the same design and the same architectural appeal. They spoke that their neighbors were quite in favor of it, and I haven't heard any different of it. I say it was a long discussion, and those that were against it were doing the right thing, because it does create more questions than it does answers in our zoning. But at the same point, we have to be a little bit more flexible when it comes to people on their property and wanting to expand in an area that is already limited. So we felt it was the best option at the time and gave it our approval.
Then what is your council member's motion?
I would make a motion to approve this zoning request, this variance request.
Okay, is there support?
May I recommend you guys read the nature? I could provide that for you,
Yeah,
so
we
the
gotta
record
do-
is really clear.
gotta-
There's two votes. One would be
Thank you.
a side yard setback of 8.5 feet instead of the 10 feet required, and then that would be one vote. And the next vote would be a lot coverage of 21% instead of the 20% required.
Okay.
If I can, just a couple questions. Mr.
Well,
Frisbee, since
What Bobby said.
We probably need a support first, though, don't we?
Yeah, we need a support.
I will
and then we'll-
support, I will support.
Been moved and supported, now we're ready for discussion. Mr. Holmes?
Sorry, I was out of line there. Two questions. One is, I had an opportunity to look at the house. First of all, the house is beautiful. My wife actually, all she ever does is talk about it when we usually drive around the village, and about how nice it looks, especially the windows. You can actually see through it and see the lake. So it's just absolutely, it's a great piece of architecture. A couple of questions, and that is, when you've got a really large tree where you want to put that driveway, and I've noticed that the way that it's set is that you're going to curve around it. I'm just curious from that aspect, how you plan to do that, because here in the drawing, obviously the tree's not to scale, but really in the photo, you see it, you got a big tree. So that was just, but obviously the way you're curving it around is in your yard, not closer to your neighbors, so I get that. So I was just curious about that. And then the other one was, is the neighbor's garage on the same side as your garage? I couldn't tell in the photo whether that is or not.
There used to have one, but not anymore. It's on the opposite.
It's on the other side? Okay.
And if it's okay, I can answer the question.
Please.
Should I get
Yeah.
the tree? That's a beautiful tree. We understand it's an English beech. We met with an arborist because it definitely has some damage.
Yeah.
Thank you. It is a gorgeous tree. It's an English beech. We met with an arborist because it's obvious the tree has some damage to it. And before we decided we want to go to great lengths to save it, we wanted to make sure it was worthwhile. And he wholeheartedly agreed it was worthwhile. And he gave us a lot of information on how to save it. Because obviously when we do construction, they're going to have to get vehicles back over there, and we don't want to damage the roots. And so he indicated that we'll put lots of mulch down, and they'll drive over the mulch, and that will help prevent compaction deeper down over the roots. And then we're looking at hopefully putting some kind of a permeable pavement, maybe like that. It's like what you put on playgrounds is what we're looking at. I don't know what the final decision will be, but we understand that that's something that's permeable that will help to keep water getting to those roots on that tree so we can save it.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a question. The neighbors to the north of you, the Dobies, like I lived on a lake and it was like a really big deal if somebody's house stuck out more than yours, blocking the view and stuff like that. And are they cool with that?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
We've showed them the plans. They're
Okay.
super nice, and
Okay.
it doesn't, because their orientation is further to the north too. It doesn't affect any kind of their view. We're actually, I don't think we're actually out further than they are.
Okay.
The way that the lake
Okay.
kind of goes.
And you'll block the
But-
train noise for their house.
I think we will, Mike. Yeah.
So they
I don't
probably
block
want
it for
this.
us, but
Okay, cool.
All right.
Anything?
Clarification here, Tracy, can we vote on both,
There's two different variances.
two different variances at
And
the same
I'll make a
time?
motion on the first variance of the seeking relief of the side yard setback for the construction of a residential two-car garage, home addition in the R2 zone permitted 8.5-foot setback where a 10-foot setback is required in the village ordinance.
Okay, so that's your first motion, and then we have support on that, if I recall right? Yes. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion on that? Hearing none, we'll do roll call.
Merrill,
Yes.
Reister. Yes. Bailey,
Yes.
Frisbee,
Yes.
Holmes,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
President Adams.
Yes. And the second one?
Second one is, and I'll make a motion to support a variance seeking relief of maximum lot coverage for the construction of a residential two-car garage, home addition, R2 zone permitted lot. Coverage of 21% where maximum 20% is allowed according to village ordinance.
Okay, is there support? Support. Moved and supported. Any further discussion by council? We'll do roll call.
Reister,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Frisbee,
Yes.
Holmes,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
Merrill,
Yes.
President Adams.
Yes. Okay, I guess that completes this. It's ready for the village manager's report.
Thank you, President Adams. Couple things we wanted to bring to the attention of the council, and they involve donations that the village was a pass-through, if you will. We received a $10 tithing opportunity from the company that does our payroll services, and staff made the determination that that would be donated to Generous Hands locally. So staff did not utilize that. That was passed on to Generous Hands. And then as well, our DPW crew for the Christmas in the Village parade was voted a place there which received $200. They unanimously agreed that that $200 would be given to South County Community Services, and has been done. So we wanted to bring that to the attention of the council and answer any questions that the council might have.
most appreciative of their generosity. So, thank you to the staff.
Before, I wanted to update the council that because we will be publicly noticing an ordinance, if you recall, we enacted an opt-out ordinance involving marijuana that was needed to be looked at again here in 2020. That will come in front of the council on February 17th, and we will be publicly noticing that tomorrow. We will let you know that staff is recommending a permanent opt-out. We will have a summary for February 17th, both from the village manager's office and our attorney, Andrew Horn. The foundation of that involves the infrastructure loan federally. We have accepted that loan, which the council approved in December of 2018. As part of that, now the federal government has a marijuana compliance certification that President Adams and myself have to sign each year, that the village would not be use revenues generated from a marijuana-related activity, and it's the advice of our attorney to have a permanent opt-out in the village. So, but we'll go into those details, and council will have a summary a week before. But we wanted to know, since it was being publicly noticed, that that's coming at the next council meeting. We do have an issue at 11B, reference Angels Crossing rental equipment. And again, what this piece of equipment is a T4 Bobcat compact track loader. Basically, it is a Bobcat with tank tracks on it that can get out into areas of Angels Crossing, as well as our trail, non-motorized trail system that goes up to TU Avenue. The piece of equipment was rented a couple years ago. It's between $1,200 and $1,400 a day to rent. We have worked and received 3 bids to rent the piece of equipment for 30 days here in the winter, due to the extensive work that we want to do. If anyone's familiar with Angels Crossing, one of the creek that runs along the 4th hole is basically obstructed view down that. So that would be one significant area. It's also wet in that area that this piece of equipment would be used for. The 3 bids, the high was $11,800 and then $11,200, but I believe it's Carlton Equipment has a bid of $10,000 for the 30 days if we use it in the winter, which we would both, Jason Culver, who's here, would work with Randy Skippers of DPW, because the village would also be using that 2 to 4 days on different projects that we have. The piece of equipment to purchase new is $93,000, and it's a piece of equipment that just doesn't get that use yearly by the village. Therefore, we look at this option of a 1 month, call it a rental or lease, at the $10,000 mark. Depending upon the days the village needs to use the equipment, the majority of that would be paid, overwhelming majority will be paid by Angels Crossing in the 584 code, and there is sufficient money, and staff is recommending authorization, but it is at a level that would require the council as well on a voice vote at the $10,000 amount. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I just had a question. Is it possible to have somebody work at night and use it night and day, and use it for 15 days? Just a question.
We have kept only 2 individuals on staff out at Angels, so I think the use of that in our evaluation, it would be best at the 30-day mark. Also in the even the lighting out there, because there's no lighting on the course whatsoever. So, in safety of the workers, it'd be our recommendation that it's rented for 30 days. It will be used each and every day to not sit idle. And I can confirm that if the totality of work was done in less than 30 days, if there is a refund on that, I don't know that sitting here, but I certainly can check with that.
Okay, the request is for 10,000.
In approval of $10,000,
Okay.
up to $10,000 out of the 584 account. The balance in that account is about $270,000 when I left the village
Okay.
last Wednesday.
Chair would like to entertain a motion for approval of the same.
So moved.
Is there support?
I'll support.
Moved and supported. Any further discussion? I'd just like to take this opportunity before we vote. Could we have Dave Messini, you introduce Dave and the
Sure.
staff?
We
'Cause I don't
asked
know they've been-
the gentleman responsible for, along with Tom Ham, but Dave Messini, Jason Culver, Matt Simonson. Jason and Matt responsible for, Jason is the superintendent, and Matt's his right-hand person out there for the grounds, but Dave is the general manager on site.
Yeah.
And all three of them, again, along with Tom Ham's leadership, has really turned the perception and comments on the golf course 180 degrees. So very much appreciative of their efforts, and that's why we've asked them to come down tonight.
Okay, well, I would echo that, and with the motion in a second,
There-
if there's no further questions.
One comment, we will have Tom Ham here March 3rd.
Okay.
For a yearly review of the golf course, along with presenting the 2020-2021 game plan specific to the golf course and under Renaissance leadership out there. So that'll happen March 3rd at the council meeting.
You were reading my mind. Thank you.
Is
Okay.
it says March 2nd on my sheet.
Whatever date the first Monday of March is. I could have been wrong in the date, but I guarantee it'll be the first Monday at 7 p.m. right in this room.
Second, okay. All right.
If I could?
Please, one more question.
In realizing last year the depth of information that was provided and how long council meeting went, would just ask that we try to build the schedule around that so that the council meeting isn't going for 2 hours.
You're talking on the presentation of the golf course?
Yes.
Sure, whatever the council would like, if you want to, it's your discussion and ability, if you want a work session and to bring Tom in at 6 o'clock, which has a hard end at 7 o'clock, or if you'd rather have it at the council meeting, it's whatever you would like.
I would defer to you and President Adams on that, but I would just ask that, last year I do appreciate the level of detail that's provided, but quite candidly, it was excessively long. So I'll just, that's my thought on the matter.
Okay, we'll take that into consideration. We have a motion right now, I believe, Tracy, in a second. If there's no further discussion, we'll do roll call.
Bailey?
Yes.
Frisbee?
Yes.
Holmes?
Yes.
Keller?
Yes.
Merrill?
Yes.
Reister?
Yes.
President Adams?
Yes. Does that conclude your comments, Jim?
That does, President Adams, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That moves us down to department committee reports. South County Fire, Colin?
Yeah, Bill, it's been pretty light winter, so we're
Mike.
pretty light in calls.
Who's got it on?
It's
Mike?
on.
Oh, it's on. Okay.
Only 79 calls this month. Usually we're right around 100, so nothing other to report.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward.
Okay, this brings us to citizens' time. If there's any citizen that would like to address the council on a non-agenda item, it's time to move to the podium and give your name and address. We have a gentleman at the back. Would you come to the podium, sir, and state your name for our clerk and your address?
My name is Henry Yapel. That's Y-A-P-L-E. I was born in the village 79 years ago, and I was here for the first 23, and then I've been busy elsewhere. I wanted to address the council because I was, my curiosity was piqued when I read the first part of the article about village managers, what I thought overly solicitous concern about the historical village. I am a charter member of that society. I think there's only 2 of us left, Warren Lawrence and myself, so I do have a long-standing interest. However, when I read the last part of the article, I was somewhat alarmed because President Wiertyla, is that correct? Wiertyla, is that his correct name? Said that he was concerned about the life of the historical society, and I can't imagine Vicksburg without it. It adds greatly to the village's culture and history. It, I think, is nearly a starting point for the trail system, which is a rather marvelous thing. And I would take something out of a bit of experience that I think is important to this. My wife and I do a lot of hiking and biking and canoeing and that sort of thing, as well as skiing. And a couple summers ago, we were paddling on the Coeur d'Alene River toward the mouth of the river, which is paralleled by a bike path. It's about 78 miles long. It begins at the top of Lookout Pass, which is the border of Montana and Idaho, and that 78-mile trail goes all the way out to Harrison. And it was filled with people on bikes. And we talked to the man in the town, and he said that bike path saved this town. It was a logging town, a timber town before. Now you're building what I would presume is a fairly extensive non-motorized trail system. And I would urge you not to lose the historical village and to use your trail system and your quilt trail and so on. These are all assets. These are things that people come from away that spend tourist money. That's clean money. They leave it, usually with credit cards, and you keep it. That historical village is a result of a lot of people's love and dedication. And I think it's well to keep it. And I would finish this by saying that my father was the village clerk for a number of years. Before that was blown up to a village manager position by, I think, Mr. I've forgotten his name, Don Flanders. Yeah. So do be careful, please. That's enough. I don't live here. I live in the state of Wyoming, not the city of Wyoming. And I happen to be here because my aunt has a health issue. But this is important. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Are there any other citizens that would like to approach the council at this time? Okay, it's President's time. Looking for candidates for the Parks and Recreational Committee. There's openings there. I'll be working with Jenny Holmes to try to see that the people that show interest get a copy of the application in their hands. I think we've got another month before we take a look at the applications and select members for the Parks and Rec Committee. And then I'll go to trustees' time, and I'll start with Julie. Oh, gee. Oh, gee. Pressure, huh? No pressure? Mr. Holmes.
None for me, Bill, thank you.
Mr. Keller.
All good.
All good? Tim?
Wow.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I would like to make one comment. I welcome you, Henry, and I worked with your mother for many years in the school system. So when you said who you were, I was excited. I've never met you, so. And I thought a lot of your mother. And I feel very strongly about the Historical Society also, so.
Mr. Bailey.
I'm all set, Bill.
Okay. And Henry, I suggest you talk to Mr. Watella here. I think the Historical Society is in good hands with him and other members of the society that are in this room. And the council's asked them to come back to us with a proposal on how funding's likely going to happen. I think it's in March. I forget who made that motion.
No.
Carl, was it in March? May, we're looking for a report back from both the groups to find out how we can achieve success. So with that, we are adjourned.